I'm going to presume that most of you guys live in a city or a town or a village. Basically, you live near other people. You don't live out in the wilderness. In almost every country in the world there are forests though where nobody lives at all. Sometimes nobody even goes there, except for forest rangers. Now you may have a different name for them where you're from, but it's their job to go into the woods when nobody else will, to investigate disturbances and potentially save people's lives. I found some of their most shocking tales for our video today. I hope you're comfortable with this. My name is Danny Burke and this is the top 10 scary forest ranger stories. Starting off at number 10 now, we have Through Him. This one comes from Reddit user SuperDan23. Now I thought I'd start off with a really strong one. Hopefully this doesn't creep you guys out too much. SuperDan said, I worked at a summer camp where the cabins were arranged in a circle, a center building that was used for showers and bathrooms. One night, one of my campers, about 12 years old, asked to go to the bathroom just as we had all gotten into bed. I tell him to take his bunkmate and to go quickly. The bathroom building is about 100 feet away. The kids are kind of dorking around like kids do and they take off for the bathroom running. All of a sudden I hear screams that still haunt me. Hysterical, choking for air, horror movie screams. I jump up and run out. And I see the two boys sitting on the ground right outside the bathrooms and they are kind of holding each other. After a few minutes they calm down enough and they say they ran through a man. They say he appeared right before they got to the bathroom door and was standing in the doorway. They didn't have enough space to stop and when they put their hands up they went through him and into the door. They said there was cold air around him and that was it. He was gone. They said he had a suit on and black slicked black hair and was smiling. We had to call the parents and they both went home the next morning. No kid goes home from summer camp, man. It still freaks me out. Next up at number 9 now we have Good Bones. Now this is a short one but it's packed with just as much creepiness as the rest of our stories in today's video. It comes from Reddit user The Copy Paste Life. They said, our park lets kids from school in so they can look for animals in the forest and the streams. One day a kid finds molars. The teeth look like human molars but the teacher said it was a deer's. I dismissed it and completely forgot about it. 2 days later they found a corpse with a smashed skull and jaw in another part of the park. All of its teeth were missing. Local newspaper covered the story but all they had to say was thank the spooky skeletons for good bones and teeth. Okay, so with that story the bones and teeth and the skull were all creepy, but do you know what else is creepy? That newspaper. Who hears about a potential murder victim and jokes about spooky skeletons? That is really creepy. I'm just saying. Moving on to number 8 now, we have Womp. This one was posted to Reddit by OG Dinosaur. Now he admits that he's not a ranger, but rather an archaeologist who heads out to the wilderness to do studies, but in my opinion his story is too good to miss out. He said a few years back we were doing a massive survey in the middle of nowhere in the interior of BC. All the crew had gone home and it was just my boss and myself left for a few days to follow up and confirm some coordinates and finish some mapping. We head out from the motel an hour or so into the bush, middle of nowhere along deactivated logging roads. Closest town is miles and miles away. We hike out to this one area we had found a site at a few weeks previously. Now for some reason the whole area just felt off. So we get down to business and about 15 minutes after being hunched over mapping there is this weird deafening whomp sound. Like I could feel pressure in my ears. I immediately looked at my boss about 20 feet away and he is white as a ghost staring back at me. Standing there, it happens again. Whomp. Ear pressure and chest pressure like I was just squeezed. Chills all over my body and every hair is standing on end. My boss just looks at me and says, let's go. We grab all of our stuff and speed hike back to the truck. We never discussed it again. No clue what it was, but I have never been so freaked out in my life. 10 years later and I still get the chills. Moving on to number 7 now, we have Black Magic. This one comes from Reddit user Rooston Dayard. It's about to step up a gear here, guys. She said, I was a ranger at a coastal park in South Carolina, down on the islands. I saw the aftermath of some truly creepy black magic. When you open the park, you must also begin with a complete park tour, including riding down the beach. Several times in the 2 years I worked there, I came across turkeys chained up and chickens left in homemade crates for the high tide to come in and kill. Strange artifacts would always be scattered around the crest of where high tide hit. Everything from random bones to swatches of clothing could be found. Half the staff that worked there were Gula. They would tell me that was black magic, not to be confused with root magic. Black magic would be the bad kind, where you have to sacrifice life and are asking for something bad to happen. Root magic is a good magic, where you're just asking for love, health, luck, etc. and not sacrificing a life. It always freaked me out seeing it and bummed me out to clean it up. Next up at number 6 now, we have the jungle spirit. Now, do you guys believe in the spirits living in trees? If you don't, you might find this one interesting. It comes from Reddit user Morgan Explosion, who said, I was working at a survey station deep in the Malaysian jungle in Borneo, 4 hours in 4x4s to reach this spot from the nearest village. I was sleeping in one of the dorms with some of the rangers we were working with, 5 people total in the dorm. That night, I was having a nightmare and woke up at about 2 AM to the sound of footsteps outside. Whatever it was fairly big and sounded bipedal. It stopped right outside the window, so I'm staring back at the window trying hard to see. It was pitch black in the whole station since it runs on solar power and the batteries give out around midnight. Suddenly, one of the rangers shifted in her bed, making a noise, and I could hear whatever it was running away quite fast. Being a rather skeptical person in general, I woke up and asked the rangers the next day about it. They adamantly believed that it was a jungle spirit coming to check us out. The station stood on stilts, so the window sits about 10 feet off the ground. I asked about the possibility of it being a wild animal, but they said the only thing big enough to make that large of a footprint would have been a sun bear or a cloud leopard. They said it's generally unheard of for those animals to make it that close to the survey station since there are usually people milling about. The rangers have heard the footsteps before and they firmly believe that a jungle spirit was roaming about the site. Moving on to number 5 now, we have missing teens. This one comes from Genesis Pro Tech. This story is a reminder to not always jump to conclusions. They said there was a group of teens that hadn't been heard from after their scheduled return time from a camping trip. A good friend and I knew the area very well, so one of the search team and rescue guys we're friends with called us in to assist in the search. Him and I head out in the general direction the teens had set off in. We'd been hiking for almost a day and we'd seen nothing. We're about 35 kilometers into the woods at this point when we start noticing odd things. Sticks carved like spears stuck into the ground, weird carvings on the trees, a child stuffed animal hanging from a noose up in a tree. This place was nowhere near any roads. It wasn't even on the regular trails people would go on in the area. The really eerie thing was that everything was freshly carved. Somebody had been there within a couple of hours of us and made these things. Mind you, we're still looking for these teens. We kept on hiking and eventually made camp for the night, still kind of on edge from what we had seen earlier, but we settled down anyway and go to sleep. We get up with the sunrise, hoping to cover more ground before it gets too hot. We pack up the gear and get ready to go when I noticed a bit of shirt that had caught on a small tree and ripped along with some shoe prints. We were thinking, great, maybe we're close to the teens, when a radio call comes through. The teens had just been found 20 kilometers east of us and they're calling everybody back from the search. All those weird things we had seen from the day before came flooding back into my mind. We wasted no time hiking out of those woods. Next up at number 4 now, we have the crowbar. This one came from Reddit user Tinge of the Ginge, which is a great name, I must say. This one sounds more like an actual horror movie though. They said, I'm a field biologist and my job takes me to some fairly remote places. I have 2 favorite stories. The first was the time I was surveying a remote restoration site near an old trail and heard someone walking up a nearby path. All the hair on the back of my neck stood on end, so I grabbed all my stuff and started casually walking down the trail like I belonged there. I turned the corner and there was a shirtless guy swinging a crowbar around in circles, and when he saw me he started yelling, I've got a crowbar, I've got a crowbar. I think I nodded at him, squeaked something like nice crowbar, and then ran the mile or so back to my truck. And that's the reason why I always carry mace and a big knife now. Moving on to number 3 now, we have the head. This one comes from Reddit user RipeOTCDXVI. They're actually a ranger at Yellowstone National Park. That's the one that looks amazing, but it could blow up at any moment and end humanity. Yeah, that one. Anyway, they said, a couple weeks ago I was exploring the Lamar Valley, about 11 miles from the nearest road and even further to the park boundary. There, in the middle of the trail, is a perfectly severed deer head. No blood, no raggedness at the severance, perfectly intact. Now this is weird because I have seen wolf and bear kills and I used to find cougar kills in SD with radio tracking just after the cougar made them. This was not any of those things. This head was completely uneaten, eyes tongue, everything was intact. Even the ravens hadn't touched it yet. No catching, no scat, right in the middle of the trail, but again, no blood. Even a human doing it made no conventional sense. It was a doe, so it had no antlers, plus why leave it in the trail? The whole thing, even in broad daylight, gave me chills. Just an ocean of waving grass, bison calmly grazing, and a perfectly clean deer head right on the path. Moving on to number 2 now, we have the howling. This one comes from Reddit user Jax Mac. He said, I have seen weird lights, heard weird sounds, found weird stuff in the woods before, but the one that sticks out was years ago. I was camping at a friend's property in South Texas. I am asleep in my tent, and all of a sudden I wake up in the middle of the night. One of those from dead sleep to wide awake in half a second moments. I can feel something outside the tent, but I don't want to look. I have considerable camping, hiking experience, so I'm not freaking out too badly. I very slowly unzip the top of the tent, being as quiet as I can. I look out of the tent, and there is very little light. We were camped under a giant oak tree, so big the branches dipped down and connected with the ground before growing back up again. It is a huge tree, and there are lots of shadows and weird shapes. Anyway, as my eyes start to adjust, I realize there are about 40 or more coyotes all milling around the campsite, just slowly walking around, sniffing here and there, almost ghost-like in their quietness. I slowly zipped the flap back up and laid there for about 30 minutes before I fell back to sleep. In the morning, in the light, you couldn't tell anything had been there. The next night we heard the pack howling for hours in the distance. That was almost freakier than seeing them 10 feet away. And finally, number 1 now, we have burnt. This one comes from Reddit user Beer and Oxytocin. It's pretty grim, so maybe skip this last one if you're very squeamish. They said, I'm a ranger, a non-peace officer, and I work at a pretty remote desert park. This happened before I got there, but the other rangers I work with were there. They went to do a patrol during summer, our off season, at one of our seldom used campgrounds. On a patrol, our maintenance ranger found a burnt out car on one of the many sites. The desert is a weird place. He just calls the sheriff and waits. The sheriff arrives, and it turns out there's a body in the driver's seat with no arms and no legs, just a torso and head burnt. The sheriffs just marked it as a suicide and removed the vehicle. We are close to Mexico and get a lot of illegal drug traffic coming through, so I guess they don't even bother trying to solve those. Super sketchy. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed that. I'll chat to you all properly in another video because this one has gone really long. Thanks for watching as always guys. My name is Danny Burke and I will see you all in the next one.